Take 2.
Take a dose. All right. Welcome back to the Agora Podcast. We're here today with myself and Juan. And no other guest. We had to reschedule. We will have our guests back on here.
No, all our guests watched our episodes and they fucking hated it. So they were like, "Oh no, fuck these guys."
Yes. So this is probably gonna be our last episode since nobody watches it, because we can't get any more guests.
Yeah, man. Our guest said we were obnoxious, bro.
Yeah, this guy's talking shit. No, just kidding. So today probably will be a shorter episode. We're going to be talking a little bit about programming. So for those who don't know, programming basically means designing a exercise routine or some kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, pattern on how you set up your exercises.
Yeah.
In our case, it usually revolves around, or at least in powerlifting's case, it usually revolves around the big 3 lifts, squat, bench, and deadlift, and then you do other accessory movements to complement the
big 3
exercise.
Or any potential weaknesses that you might have.
Yes. Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about that, not just for powerlifting, just programming in general, and how to design your own exercise program so you can see those gains.
Yeah. Those
gains that Juan has. Give us a flex. Hey!
These are bulking gains. So
those are bulking gains. Yeah. Yes. So let's get into it.
It feels so nice not to be in the dieting phase. So nice.
So Jay is our resident expert on all things programming. He does coaching and is studying exercise science here at ASU. So we're going to ask him a couple questions.
DM me for coaching info.
DM him for coaching info. At where?
At agent_J Schroth. That's SCHROTH. It's German. I know I don't look any German whatsoever, but
quite the opposite.
Yeah.
Alrighty, let's get into it. So, what are some of the basics of programming, like the different types, and how people can utilize those? Which ones are better for what?
Well, the main 2 that I work with is a linear periodization type of programming and an undulating type of periodization. So the biggest difference between the 2 is linear periodization is what a lot of coaches followed for a very long period of time. It's basically separating your training periods into blocks. Like one block, let's call it a 4-week block, or what we would call let's see. So let's just call it a training block. That first 4-week blocks could be focused on something like hypertrophy, right? So in those first 4 weeks, you would be working towards the rep ranges of, like, let's say 8 to 12, 10 to 15, stuff like that. And then your next block could be focused on strength. So the rep ranges would be different. So 1 to 3, 3 to 5, etc. And then the last 4 weeks could be focused on speed and power. So your intensity is going to be a little bit lower. Your reps are going to be a bit lower. The focus of the block will be to perform very explosive movements.
So what's the difference between strength and power? Because I feel like a lot of people get those mixed up.
Well, power is more, it's explosive movement. Mm-hmm. So fast type movements. So like jumping, throwing, those kinds of things. So movements that usually take anywhere between 1 and 2 seconds to perform. Mm-hmm. You know, as opposed to strength. We're talking about strength in my sport, in powerlifting. We're talking about maximal strength, so 1 rep max. So how much weight you can move for 1 rep, and those are usually slower. So the name powerlifting is kind of a misnomer because power indicates fast movement, right? And then powerlifting is not really a fast sport. It's a very slow sport. I've very rarely seen somebody go up on a platform and try to hit a PR or a 1 rep max, and they're moving that fast.
And
usually,
blast through.
It's nobody blasts through a movement. It's usually very slow. Yeah, so that's the main difference between power and strength.
So you said we got linear periodization, and then what was the other?
The other is undulating periodization. It's
actually, hold on. Let's go back to linear periodization. So how does one progress through those training blocks?
So it really depends. So let's say you're doing your first block of training, right? You're focusing on hypertrophy. So within week to week, you could change the rep ranges, you could change the intensity, and that's how you would progress. And it would basically stay the same for your strength block and your power block. And then after the, let's say, 12 block cycle, then you'd repeat it. So you'd either, again, increase the rep ranges, increase your intensity, or increase the number of sets you do. So you're basically manipulating the volume of work that you're performing each time. Now, the biggest difference between that and, did you have a question?
I was going to say, so for those who don't know, volume is very easy calculation. It's basically just a measurement of the amount of work that you're doing in terms of weight. So it's going to be the weight in pounds or kilograms, whatever it is, that you lifted, times the
number of sets that you're doing, times the number of reps that you're doing. So weight times sets times reps.
Easy enough.
Is how you would calculate volume. And for linear periodization, the way that you would progress is if you progress in your volume, then you're progressing.
Hence the term
you don't have to make it much more complicated than that. If you're progressing in your volume, then you're making gains towards whatever it is that you're trying to work towards too.
And then there has recently, fairly recently been shown another type of periodization that has been seen as superior to linear. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, from everything that I've read so far on undulating periodization, it has been shown pretty much to be superior, the superior method of periodization versus linear. Just because with linear periodization, what a lot of people see is that so let's say you're spending the first 4 weeks focusing on hypertrophy, right? And then after the 4 weeks, you would jump over to strength, and after that, you jump over to power. What happens in between the transition, in between those phases, is that you tend to lose some of the adaptations that you got from the previous training block.
So what do you mean by adaptations?
Well, so to make it simple, let's say you're in a hypertrophy block, right? And you're moving in rep ranges from 12 to 15. You would get really good at moving weight within those rep ranges, right? So because that has a lot of benefits to not only your muscular hypertrophy, but it also has cardiovascular benefits because you're completing a lot of reps. So those sets tend to go on for a lot longer than as opposed to, let's say, your strength blocks or your power blocks. So you'd make adaptations in that block, and then when you transition over to a strength block, you're going from 12 to 15 reps, and now you're dropping down to maybe between 1 and 5 reps. So the adaptations that you make within the 12 to 15 rep ranges aren't necessarily kept. Again, because you lose adaptations fairly quickly if you don't train for specificity. So if you're not training in the 12 to 15 rep ranges, you're going to lose a lot of the adaptations that you made within those rep ranges when you transition over to the 1 and 5 rep ranges. It's a lot. You don't lose strength adaptations as fast as you do power adaptations because power adaptations are more neuromuscular in nature. So you tend to lose those a lot quicker than strength adaptations.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, one funny thing that I've noticed, especially kind of a good example of those adaptations that you can lose or just hold on to is, so I come from a more traditional bodybuilding style background. So for a long time, all I did was somewhere in like the 8 to 12 rep ranges. And just recently, I've started more of a powerlifting style program where I'm doing I still have those hypertrophy ranges built in there, but I have a lot more strength focused training days as well. And one thing that I've noticed is that it gets pretty tough sometimes for me to get those heavier sets in, just because I'm not used to lifting such heavy weight so often. Whereas before, I've been so quote unquote adapted to getting those lighter 8 to 12 rep ranges.
The higher volume stuff that's a little bit lower intensity.
Yes, absolutely. I just think that's kind of interesting how it how you can actually see and kind of feel those adaptations either grow or lose those.
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you tried something for the first time and you start upping the frequency, then you'll start to realize that not only is it harder, that you're also recovering a lot slower, you know, because your body's just not used to doing those kinds of things. But yeah, so going back to losing adaptations, right, as a switch over, you could try this yourself. You could go for a 4-week block and train strictly within the 12 to 15 rep ranges, and then go to your strength block and train within the 1 to 5 rep ranges. And then in your following block, you could try and go back to hypertrophy, and you're going to notice that you're not as good as moving within the 12 to 15 rep ranges as you were when you started, because you tend to lose some of the adaptation when you don't. Again, specificity is very important, whatever sport you're doing, and if you don't train specifically for that goal, then you're going to lose adaptations very quickly. Yeah. So, and what's great about the undulating type of periodization is that it kind of combines a lot of the different concepts that linear periodization is built upon. So typical undulating periodization mesocycle, which is usually 4 weeks, will combine power, strength, and hypertrophy in one. So as opposed to a linear periodization type of training where you dedicate separate blocks to different concepts like hypertrophy, strength, and power, and they'll be separated by long periods of time. Linear periodization, you could have those same concepts within the week. So for example, a very common way of structuring an undulating periodization type of routine is that a Monday, Wednesday, Friday slip, where Monday you would train for hypertrophy, so a specific rep range, 12 to 15, and then Wednesday would be power, so you'd be training in rep ranges of 1 to 3, and the intensity would be fairly moderate, probably be around 40 to 60% of your 1 rep max. And then on Friday would be your strength block, your strength day. You'll be training anywhere between 1 to 5 reps, and your intensity will be a bit higher. So in that sense,
real quick, just to make it clear for everybody, when he says intensity and 40 to 65% or so, he means 65, just for a number, 65% of your 1 rep max.
Yeah.
So if you are going to start a program like this, I would recommend, at least for the bigger lifts, squat, bench, dead, maybe even overhead press if you're going to do that. Yeah. Test out your 1 rep max safely, of course, and see where you're at, because it's going to make designing a program a lot easier to do so.
Yeah.
Now
there's ways to work around that. Like, let's say you're not really comfortable testing your 1 rep max. You've never done it before.
Which is fine.
Yeah.
If you don't.
It's completely fine. Like, let's say you've trained bodybuilding style your whole life. You've never done a true 1 rep max. There are a lot of calculators out there that you could just plug in. Okay. You'll pick a weight that you think you could do. Let's say if I ask you to do an 80, pick a weight that you think is 80% of your 1 rep max. You'll pick a weight that you think you could do for X amount of reps, and then you'll just rep it out. And then we could plug that number in, however many reps you did at that weight. We could plug that into calculators, and 1 rep max calculators are abundant within the internet.
Do you just Google 1 rep max calculator?
Yeah, just Google 1 rep max calculator. You plug in the weight that you did and the amount of reps that you did, and then the calculator will spit out a number for you of your estimated 1 rep max, and you can base your programming around that 1 rep max. So you don't have to actually perform a true 1 rep max. Mm-hmm. It's better if you do, just because it's going to be a lot more accurate. But the 1 rep max calculators are pretty good too. Yeah. Gotcha. So my advice though is to pick a weight that's heavy enough that you could do it for a maximum of maybe 5 to 6 reps, because as your reps increase, the calculations tend to be a little bit less accurate. So if you're plugging into the number that you did for 10 reps and it gives you an estimated 1 rep max, that's going to be a lot less accurate than if you pick the weight that you can only do for like 5 to 6 reps, and then you get a different 1 rep max number that way.
Excuse me. Gotcha. So going back to DUP, daily undulating periodization, what we've been talking about, what it seems like is that you don't lose those adaptations because you're training you're training basically all the different types of training within a relatively close amount of time.
Yeah. So you're all of those. So what those aspects are, they're called the health-related components of fitness, and then the sport-related components of fitness. So your muscular strength, endurance, flexibility, muscular strength. I said muscular strength. So muscular strength, muscular endurance, flexibility, cardiovascular endurance would make up your health-related components of fitness. There's body composition too, but we don't really worry about that. And then the sports-related components of fitness would be your speed, your agility, your coordination, your balance, power, etc. So those are the concepts that we're talking about when we're talking about the concepts within undulating periodization. And the reason why you don't lose those adaptations is because you're constantly getting that stimulus. Mm-hmm. You're getting a stimulus for strength, you're getting a stimulus for power, you're getting a stimulus for hypertrophy. So your body never loses those adaptations. Granted, you have to be a little bit more careful with how you structure your programming because you are trying to attack different concepts all at once. You can't go too overboard with any of the three. So there has to be a good balance in how you structure your programming. Otherwise, you risk overtraining.
Yeah. What have you found that's been most, I guess, beneficial in terms of preventing injury and seeing gains either in strength or hypertrophy and things like that? Like, I know it'd be pretty tough to do like a strength day and then a hypertrophy day right after each other, or
so back to back. That's why most DUP blocks are structured, like I mentioned earlier, a Monday, Wednesday, Friday split. So each training day that focuses on a specific concept, whether it be strength, power, hypertrophy, is separated by a good amount of time. Mm-hmm. Because again, some people, they might be able to recover well with just a day in between. Some people might need to take longer. The Monday, Wednesday, Friday split is just one way to do it. It's usually what's used when you go read through the literature of the research that's actually out there. That's a very popular split. But you could set up a DUP block with like a 2-day-a-week split. You could do hypertrophy on Monday, and then you could do power on Friday, and then next Monday you could do strength. So what's great about DUP is you can work in all those different concepts of training into your program, and you don't have to be so strict with like a 5-day or a 3-day split. You could be very broad.
Yeah, DUP isn't limited to a week. Like you can, like you said, you can do a strength and hypertrophy day 1 week, and then the following week you could do power and speed, and then repeat or do another way.
So if your schedule is so busy that you can only fit in 2 days a week, you could still do a DUP type cycle with just 2 days.
Yeah.
So that's what's really great about it. It's really flexible.
Yeah. And so how would you say someone gets started with designing their own program?
Well, I think first you need to ask what your goal is. Mm-hmm. That's probably the most important because, again, the more concrete your goal is, the easier it is to program for something. Like for me, my goal is to improve my total for my next meet. So everything that I do when it comes to programming revolves around improving that total. So that's that's focusing most of my main movements on the barbell-based movements, squat, bench, and deadlift, and all of my accessories will enhance those lifts or cover weaknesses. Like if your goal is to train for a marathon, you won't necessarily train the way that I do.
You're not going to be
deadlifting. If you're training to run the like a 40, like you're training for the combine, and you're training to make that 40 as the fastest 40 that you can run, then you'll train differently from a marathon runner. You train differently from what I do. So having a goal that's concrete is probably the most important. And then the next step I would say is figure out when your end goal is. So for me, that's prepping for a competition.
Mm-hmm.
Because once you have a due date set, whether it be, if you're just an average Joe and you want to get, you want to look good for a wedding, or you want to look good for the beach in summer, so you'd have a deadline set for that. For me, I have a date when my next competition is, and that's how it is for most athletes.
Mm-hmm.
So for athletes, it could be the start of the season, or anything like that. So having an end date in mind allows you, it gives you a time frame, right, of how much time exactly you have to work in terms of programming.
Yeah.
So once you have a set amount of time, then you could start breaking those down into different training blocks. So that would be the second most important thing. So first is to have a concrete goal in mind, and second is to have your deadline. What's when your competition is, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
And then after those two, it would really depend on the person's training age, I would say, because after I have my goal, after I have my deadline, then how am I gonna structure my my volume, right?
Training age stands for how often you've been, or
Yeah.
how much
How long you've been
experience you
training.
have with training.
Yeah. So if you've been training since you're 1 year old, then your training age will probably be the same as your biological age. And if you're Chinese or Russian, then most likely, then yes, your training age and your
Chinese or Russian Olympic
biological
gymnasts.
age will probably match up. So yeah, then I would worry about structuring my volume, my intensity.
Mhm.
So again, that's very specific to my goals.
Yep.
If my goal is to train for a powerlifting meet, then my intensity will probably stick anywhere between the 70 to the 80% rep ranges. And it'll stay like that for the majority of my training.
Yeah.
So goal, deadline, volume of work is probably the three most important things that I would say when you're structuring a program.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So
Volume and intensity of work. I say just volume, but intensity, your sets and reps all fall within volume of work. So.
yeah, the volume, neither of us can stress this enough. The volume is going to be the main driver of the growth, whether it be for strength or hypertrophy. Just getting the total amount of reps and work done is what's going to be the main thing that drives the growth. It's not going to be the supplements that you take, or even your nutrition. It's going to be just getting in and getting the work done.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and then you have to figure out what type of program do you want to set up. Like we go back to the two types of periodization we talked about earlier. Do you want to do a linear periodization type of training? Do you want to do a daily undulating periodization type of training? Those become very important. And then you go pick your exercise selection. So again, it all goes back to specificity and your goals. So for me, in powerlifting, my main three movements would be the barbell-based movements, squat, bench, and deadlift. And then after I pick out my main movements for the program, then I pick out the accessories. So what accessories will enhance those lift? For squat, there's a lot of squat variations. There's safety bar squat, there's the front squat, there's a low bar and a high bar back squat. There's tempo squats, and same thing for the bench and deadlift. For bench, there's a cambered bar. There's dumbbell bench press. There's a tempo bench. There's banded bench presses. You could use chains, and the same goes for deadlifts. So after I pick my main movements, then you'll pick the accessories that enhance those movements. And it's the same thing for bodybuilding. For bodybuilding, you figure out the rep ranges that you're going to work in, you figure out the volume, the intensity that you're going to work in, and then you pick the movements that if you're trying to bodybuilding, you're trying to enhance physique, so you pick the movements that will, they'll give you the most bang for your buck.
Yep.
And then you move on by picking movements that enhance your lagging body parts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one little difference between, I would say, powerlifting and bodybuilding is that a lot of powerlifting style programs, right now my program is centered like this. I have it, like he said, based on one of the big three lifts, squat, bench, or dead. Whereas bodybuilding, they don't necessarily have a primary lift that they do.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean they can't do DUP. So
Exactly.
they can still absolutely do it with even something with like a cable tricep push down. They can still undulate meaning like shift, change the repetitions.
Undulate just means you're changing the intensity, and and by changing the intensity, you're changing the volume of work that you do. So even with a tricep press down, you can do a DUP style of training.
Yes, because one day you could do like 20 reps and then give it like 1 or 2 days later after you're.
I mean, I gotta say, I've never tried DUP with accessory movements. Just because I think that, not that you can't do it, I just think that it's gonna be too much of a damn hassle. Like, just structuring the main three movements, squat, bench, deadlift, is difficult enough. I think that if I tried doing DUP for all my accessory movements, it would just be a total headache. And for me working with clients, if I threw all that information at them all at once, they're just, all of that's gonna go straight out the window over their head.
So then what do you do to ensure that they do these accessory movements but still see progress?
What do you mean?
So I'll give you an example for myself. Like we said earlier, volume is going to be the primary driver for growth, hypertrophy, strength. What I do, and kind of what I based it off of what you did, was I would do, let's just go back to tricep pushdown. I would do that for however many sets and reps 1 week, and then the following week I would up the repetitions that I did per set by 1 rep. So I was making sure that I was still increasing volume, even if it was just a very small incremental amount.
Oh yeah, I mean, well yeah, that's the simplest way to do it. Even if it's just by 1 rep or 1 set, or you increase the intensity slightly, it's still overload.
Yeah.
Right.
So let's talk about that real quick. There's a concept called progressive overload that I think a lot of people don't know what it is or how to apply it.
All right. So to keep it simple, progressive overload just means that in order to make progress in the gym, you have to do more work than you did previously. So, for example, a very popular program is the starting strength 5x5, and you can do that for a long period of time, but you're not gonna making so much. You can't make progress on 5x5 forever. Like, you can't go in and do just 5 sets of squats at, like, let's say 135 pounds and do that forever. So at some point you're gonna have to increase the intensity or the volume in some way. You're gonna have to go to maybe 155 pounds. You're gonna have to maybe do an extra set. You're gonna have to do maybe an extra rep to continue making progress, because the body is a pretty amazing mechanism, or it's just, it adapts quickly to the stresses that you throw at it. So if you don't keep feeding it these new stresses, the new stimuli, then it's going to adapt very quickly, and you're going to find that you're going to hit a wall and you're just not going to make any progress at all. So to put it very simply, progressive overload just means that in order to make progress, you have to keep doing more work than you did previously.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So,
and that's just not, so a lot of people might think that, all right, I just have to increase the volume, right? So, like, let's say I had a pencil, right? And I curled that pencil for 10 reps. And let's say I was just making progress off of that pencil, right? And you're like, okay, I hit a wall, and now I'm going to curl this same pencil for 15 reps. It doesn't work like that.
Or a bigger pencil.
Yeah, or a bigger pencil. A dumbbell would have probably been a better. Let's say a dumbbell, right?
You got those baby gains.
I curl a 25-pound dumbbell for 3 sets of 10, right? And then through the concept of progressive overload, if I go to 4 sets of 10 with that same 25-pound dumbbell, then I should make progress. It doesn't always work like that. It might work like that for a time, but there has to be a certain intensity threshold that you have to cross in order to make gains toward not only strength but also towards hypertrophy. Now, there's a lot of research out there that's showing that even at very low intensities, you can still make gains in hypertrophy. But in general, a lot of that research is for non-trained individuals. Like you can't have an elite athlete train at low intensity and expect them to make any significant gains in strength or hypertrophy whatsoever. Yeah. So there has to be a certain intensity, that threshold that you have to cross in order to make gains towards those goals. From most of the research that I've read, it has to be, now when I'm gonna use this as a percentage of water at max. It's usually about 60%. The threshold is usually about 60% that you have to cross in order to make gains in strength and hypertrophy. So you have to be at least minimum 60%.
To see any kind of... Now, is that exclusively hypertrophy or strength as well?
It's for both.
For both.
Hypertrophy, strength. Not so sure about power, because I'm a power lifter. I'm not an Olympic lifter. So I've never really trained within that rep range. So I'm not too familiar with the research there. But yes, that a minimum intensity that you have to meet in order to make gains towards strength and hypertrophy. You can't just be curling that same dumbbell over and over again, adding sets, adding reps, and then expect for your muscle to grow.
Yeah. So we talked about the minimum that you can absolutely do to see any kind of gains, but obviously people are wanting to maximize and limit the amount of time that they have to spend training and getting all that done so they can see those as much results as they can. What are, and I know we kind of talked about this a little bit already, but what are like the quote-unquote optimal or what the research has shown to be the best rep ranges for things like strength and hypertrophy?
Back. Okay, so can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the optimal rep ranges for strength and hypertrophy.
Okay,
as shown by the research.
From what the research has shown, there isn't a one-size-fits-all rep range when it comes to maximizing gains in strength and maximizing gains in hypertrophy. What research has shown, and I'm going to allude to one study that was done by Brad Schoenfeld a couple years ago.
The OG, if nobody knows, Brad Schoenfeld.
He basically put two groups of people together, right? One group trained specifically in the quote-unquote bodybuilding type rep range, and then the other group trained specifically in the strength rep range, so let's say 1 to 5. And then they made them work out, and after the study they took measurements of how much hypertrophy actually occurred within the two groups. And what they found was that both groups, whether they trained in the bodybuilding type rep range or the power or the strength rep range, what they found was that both groups experienced similar amounts of hypertrophy. So what that told me immediately was that there is a broad rep range for hypertrophy. So I can gain muscle whether I'm training in the 1 to 5 range, and I can also gain muscle whether I'm training in the 8 to 10 or the 12 to 15 rep ranges, and anything else in between, the 20, like 15 to 20 rep range, that I'm going to be able to gain muscle there. So that's the first takeaway. Now, the caveat to that is, what they did find was the group that trained in the strength rep range, the 1 to 5, they got a lot stronger.
I'm glad you made the distinction, because I was going to bring that up if you didn't.
Yeah. So they got a lot stronger than the group that trained strictly within the bodybuilding type rep range. So what that told me was that although you could get stronger training in the 8 to 15 rep range, the strength is very specific. Again, we're going back to specificity. In order to get strong, you have to train to get strong. You have to train for it. So if you want to get good at moving maximal loads, 1 to 3 rep range, you have to train within those rep ranges.
Yeah.
So
1 to 3 rep ranges at a higher intensity, higher percentage of
exactly.
max.
So, one, you can gain muscle within a big range of reps, and two, strength is very specific. You can get strong with your 8 to 15 rep range, but if you want to get really strong, you have to train within the 1 to 3 range.
If you want to look like me, 8 to 12. If you want to look like him and live like him, 1 to 5.
Yeah,
is what he's saying.
Yeah,
he's talking shit.
So strength is very specific. Yes,
that's the gist of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm glad he made a distinction. Strength and hypertrophy are two very different goals. One is to lift the absolute heaviest weight that you can.
Mm-hmm.
The other is to increase. Hypertrophy literally means to increase the size of your muscle cells.
Yes.
That's literally what it means.
Although most powerlifters nowadays are getting a lot more jacked and tan.
That is true.
So
that is true.
they're the movement.
Larry
There's
Wheels.
a movement.
Shout out Larry Wheels.
Look at Larry Wheels, man. That boy.
He's a freaking monster.
Jacked and tan would be an insult, I
Yes.
think, to describe Larry Wheels.
Absolutely. Well, that's everything that I got in terms of designing your program. Do you have anything else in mind that you can think that people should know about designing a program?
I think keeping it simple is best. So find out what your goal is. Always have a deadline. Always have a deadline in sight. Even if it's not the end all, you should always have a deadline. Whether if it's, like just a wedding, you want to look good for the beach, you have a competition to get ready for, always have a deadline. So
that's just going to help you be more accountable because
Exactly.
you have something to stare at.
Because now it's real.
Yeah.
Suddenly it's real.
Yeah.
You're not. It's not just up in the air.
It's not just
floating
a someday.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's that I wanna look like this, because it looks good. Like no, I wanna look like this because summer's coming up, or I wanna achieve total because I have a meet coming up.
Yeah.
It makes it tangible.
Or it's even better because instead of saying I want to do this, when you set a deadline, it's like I
You have to do this.
I will do this
Exactly.
at this time.
Exactly.
Make these
Yeah.
numbers at this time, and
Yeah.
so on.
And like in my case, there's a membership fee for the USAPL, so I have to pay the membership fee, and once I pick a meet, I have to pay the meet fees. So
Yeah.
now I've invested money in it.
Yes.
So not only do I have an end date to when I have to compete, I've also invested my money into it now. So it's again, it becomes tangible. It's not up in the air anymore. It's something that I want to do. Now it's something that I have to do. So your goal, have a deadline, and once you figure those two things out, your exercise selection becomes very important. What main movements you're going to do, and then afterwards, number 4 would be your accessory movements for the main exercises you're going to be performing, and then your volume, your sets, your reps, your intensity.
And once again, it's going to depend on your training age, how long you've been training. If you haven't been training for a long time or you're brand new to exercise, don't go ham in the gym, because then you're setting your volume threshold, quote unquote. Right? I don't even know why I say quote unquote. Your volume threshold, very, very high.
Yeah.
And so say you're 12 years old starting to lift, which is I think around the time that I started training. If I would have just went nuts at the gym all the time, I would have to do way much more work than I would have to do now. I'd have to be spending 4 hours in the gym just for one workout, and I would have to be there for 6 times a week.
Yeah.
So don't feel the need to go nuts if you are starting new. Honestly, if you're new, you're gonna see gains regardless of what you do.
And there's 2 schools of thoughts there.
Stare at a dumbbell, you'll get shredded.
There's the minimum effective dose, and then there's the max recoverable volume.
Yeah.
And you're usually in one camp or the other. And what the minimum effective dose is basically is the minimum amount of work that you have to do in order to see gains in the gym. So if you're a beginner and that's one set of 10 for every single body part, and you can make gains of those, then by all means stay with that until you see, until you hit a wall, or until you see very small amount of return.
Then move up.
Now there's also the other camp, the max recoverable volume. What they believe is you do the most amount of work that you can recover from efficiently. So you're always pushing the threshold of what you can recover from, and not go into the the overtraining ranges. But to be quite honest, from a lot of the literature that I'm reading, it all falls in between. Like the minimum effective dose and the max recoverable volume are very close.
Yeah.
Are very close. They're like super deep, like super duper close. Yeah. So whichever one you choose, stick to it. You're most likely going to.
What I would say is, if you are brand new to training or lifting, or even if you're someone that has been training for a while and you just want to really dial in your training and start actually designing a program rather than just going into the gym and be like, hey, I haven't hit legs for a while, I'll hit legs. I would say minimal effective dose would be the better option, just because, I mean,
and for most clients, I do that way.
Yeah, I mean,
like
you're not a competitive powerlifter, you're not a bodybuilder, so you're not trying to, you don't have people to compete against besides yourself, and you can still compete against yourself and do the minimal effective dose.
Yeah,
you're not trying to beat somebody else in a competition, so you're not having to push the boundaries. And also, max recoverable volume, I think, would be more susceptible for people for injury. Or am I wrong?
No, I mean, if your concern is getting injured with all the volume that you're doing, then max recoverable volume probably isn't the way to go.
You already went past the max recoverable volume.
Well, no, especially if you're a beginner.
Yeah.
Because as a beginner, you don't know where that ceiling is yet, right? Jesus Christ, it's just
max recoverable volume.
Twisting me. Max recoverable volume, you're constantly just sitting below that ceiling.
Yeah.
Because once you break through, then you go through to overtraining, right? You go to overtrain. So in order to kind of be in tune with your body and to know where that ceiling is, you have to spend some time, a considerable amount of time in the gym and training and getting to know yourself as a lifter and as an athlete for you to know where that is. So, and that's why for me personally, if I'm working with beginners, I always go to the minimum effective dose. Like right now, I have a couple of clients who lifted prior to working with me, but now have just come back into lifting, and they've been off for like a good 2 years.
Yeah.
So everything that I program for them is the minimum amount of work that they can make progress on. Now they're still making good progress because they've done it before, and the body is amazing. The body remembers a lot of the things that we used to do, and they used to powerlift. So the gains are coming back really fast.
Yep.
But at the same time, even though they want to push, and I know that they could do more than necessarily what I'm programming for them, I'm still programming them the minimum amount of volume that they're making progress on, just because they're getting back into the sport.
Yeah.
So if it's a beginner, I would say minimum effective dose. Especially with a sport like powerlifting or even bodybuilding or Olympic weightlifting, the goal of the sport is always longevity. You want to be able to be in your sport and stay in there and perform the best that you can as long as possible.
Yeah.
So for newer athletes and newer individuals in general, I would say go to minimum effective dose. If you're an athlete who's trying to push the boundaries of what you can do, because again, once you get advanced, the more advanced you become as an athlete, the gains from training are going to be smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yeah.
So your training always has to be, again, you're always pushing the boundaries of what you can recover from in training in order to see those gains. So for experienced athletes who are more in tune with their body, who have been training for a long time, who already have a pretty good grasp on programming, that they're not going to go overboard with the volume or the intensity, then the max recoverable volume is a little bit, I would suggest that route instead.
Yeah. And in that case, with a more experienced and trained athlete, I would think that the max recoverable volume and the minimum effective dose is going to be pretty close. Would you agree?
Yeah.
I feel like as your training age increases,
those two are going to get closer and closer and closer and closer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching. You can find me on, we'll just say, the Instas at Mikey Ernesto _ the Agora. Also on my website at agora10.com, AGORATEN.
Follow all of those.
Follow all those, and follow Mr. Juan Schroth here.
Just on IG, Agent J. I said Asian. It sounded like I said Asian.
Asian Schroth.
Yeah, Agent. AGENT _ JSCHROTH. If you guys are interested in coaching, just shoot me a DM and I'll get back to you as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody. One last thing, hit up Dr. Brad Schoenfeld for some really good hypertrophy research.
Yeah. If you want to learn about the science of making your muscle grow, you can't go wrong with Dr. Schoenfeld. You know.
Yeah.
Again, he's been in this game so long. He's walked the walk. He's talked the talk. The guy has competed in bodybuilding before. He's jacked and tan. So for those of you who are thinking that he's a researcher and he's a glasses wearing, pocket protector, rocking type of dude, he's not that type.
Practices what he preaches.
Exactly, man. Walk the walk and talk the talk.
That's it.
Check him out.
Thanks, y'all.
Yeah.